Greetings and salutations. Today we'll be covering a piece of history that seems stranger than fiction, when Paris was besieged by a pack of wolves, led by the legendary wolf king Courtaud. This terrifying tale dates all the way back to the winter of 1428, when wolves began to approach the city walls of Paris. Originally, they seemed to be wary of humans and keep their distance. However, their ever-present nature caused cattle to be kept within the stables, and the townsfolk of the countryside around Paris would eventually be brought to Paris proper out of necessity, while forcing Parisians to keep any amount of cattle in the city itself in low numbers and rather well guarded. Due to the brazen actions of these wolves, it would get to the point that there would be quotes such as the following: "As the snow grew deeper and the food grew scarcer, the wolves grew more hungry and more daring. A single traveler, yes, even a small group of travelers, had no chance of escape if they entered the wolf-infested belt of the woods that stretched around Paris." There would even be quotes about the Wolf King Courtaud himself, such as the following: "Many times he would be seen by watchers and traveling troops of mounted men, but he seemed immune from all attack, and the terror of his name was all on that part of France. The common salutations of the day even changed when someone was going from Paris to some far-off point to the following: well, goodbye, God bless you, and see that Courtaud doesn't get you." In the summer and autumn of 1428, things continued in much the same way. Cattle and travelers on the outskirts of the city were picked off continually. From January to March, Paris was essentially shut down and surrounded by the hungry bands of wolves led by Courtaud. When the snow began to melt, horsemen dispatched from the king brought forth a food supply to the province, and as Courtaud attempted to raid this convoy in a seemingly very human way, he was warded off by the sounds of bells and trumpets, leading to the convoy arriving in the city without incident. Then, during the summer of 1429, both civil and foreign wars took their toll on the French population, leaving hundreds to die and become food for these wolves. One of the few encounters with Courtaud that is known to be recorded was that of the Countess of Mil, who had built a secret passageway for her dalliances with men, and it goes as follows: "Awaiting a lover, the highborn lady was on that moonlit night in the autumn of the year. Peering from her casement, she saw in view a wolf, a monster wolf, a bob-tailed wolf. In a flash, the wily dame conceived a plot. From the larder, with her own hands, she bore a chine of beef. Out the door was wide open. She rubbed the threshold with the meat, and she dragged the bloody mass along the upper door. Then from a peephole she watched. The great wolf sniffed and sniffed as he continuously drew near, and the countess saw the dim grey bulk had passed into the snare, causing her to touch the spring. There was nothing but a click, but what that click was, a warning click. The king wolf was alert. In a moment he sensed the trap, and with one great bound he cleared the treacherous place, made out the door and away unharmed, and wiser than ever before. The countess had attempted to catch the wolf in a booby trap designed for humans, and failed. As the difficult winter months came and blanketed the city in gloom, the corpses of people who died were disposed of by hurling them from the towers for the wolves to consume. It was hoped that the plague-ridden flesh would spread a disease amongst the wolves, but unfortunately all it did was sate their appetite and give them a taste for human flesh. It confirmed the wolves in their love for the flesh of man, and in essence declared the city little more than a place for the feasting of wolves. By February, deepening snow and hunger made the wolves bolder. They were visible nearly every day from the watchtowers, but had learned to keep out of the range of arrows. In the morning, the wolves' tracks showed that they had spent the night prowling the city, seeking for an entrance. Finally, one night, the wolves found their entry point through a 3-foot gap between the frozen river and a protective grill. A quote about this incident goes as follows: "They passed through a gap under the water gate, and by a dozen devious routes appeared in the great crevice before the cathedral. A band of holy men were leaving their duties in the channel to seek their homes, when down on them the wolves' band swept. Wholly taken by surprise were the victims, and wholly unarmed. In 20 minutes all were dead. The wolf pack reveled, then gorged with human flesh, they fled by the river gap that led them in, before the terrified people could spread alarm and assemble worthwhile help. 40 human beings were killed and partly devoured in that dreadful raid. Not a single wolf was slain. The city was horrified by the events. Amongst the dead was even the archbishop. Fed up, the captain of the city guard decided to take charge, and he would go on to state, 'Are Frenchmen down so low, so helpless, turned that wolves may enter the chief city when they will, and banquet in the sacred place on human flesh and blood, and to leave unharmed. This is their challenge. The challenge I accept, and on that very spot I elect to meet the king wolf. Each to each, this is my plan, if you permit, O king. Upon this request, the king accepted, allowing the captain to call a council together to form a plan. Basically, for 2 weeks, the city was on lockdown, and all the food that became garbage would be kept within the homes to prevent the wolves from getting anything outside the walls. Along with all the slaughtering that would have to take place in front of Notre Dame Cathedral, and the blood from the food scattered about in order to create a smorgasbord for the wolves, and the King's Landing would be left open for them, while a mechanism to close the gate from a window would be created. He also ordered that no one would be allowed to shoot or shout at the wolves, or make any noise which would dissuade them from entering. For the following 4 nights, wolves would come near and investigate. However, Courtaud was not with them, and they'd leave just as quickly as they came. For several more nights, the wolves would continue to come. After 10 days, the captain ordered 20 beeves to be slaughtered and left in the courtyard, with their blood run afoul. And it seemed that this did the trick, and that very night the wolves arrived in number, causing the captain to close the gate himself, trapping them within the city. In the morning, citizens would crowd around their windows, on top of walls, and even roofs, in order to see the showdown unfold. The captain would give the word, and from every vantage point, archers would let loose a hail of arrows. Wolf after wolf went down, but few would go down to a single shot. The wounded ended up being more than the dead by the time most of the arrows were fired. And even though they were on their last legs, many of the wolves were raring for a fight, as those who could still run would race around. Scores were dead after an hour was passed, and many more were wounded and would not recover. It appeared as if a great brown mass had gathered upon a single spot. And at the center of the square was a fountain, and within that fountain was where Courtaud lay. The Wolf King was dead, or so it would appear, when in reality the other wolves had gathered around to protect him, surrounded by a group of wolves which were also protected by others. By noon, hundreds of wolves had been slain. However, chief amongst them, Courtaud, remained alive, along with dozens of others. The captain, joined by a group of skilled fighters, descended on ladders into the area as he saluted his king, then marched upon the wolves. On the order of the king, the chief huntsman opened the side door and brought in a great pack of wolfhounds, in equal numbers to the wolves. But the battle was not over yet. It seemed the great Courtaud would go into the fray and slay more than a dozen of these wolfhounds. But not a wolf was slain. However, a few were hurt. Next, the captain and the guardsmen attacked with their long spears, and now many wolves would go down. However, many men were also hurt, and 5 had their throats slashed. There were cheers from the crowd as they pushed the fight. With their long lances, they reached under the fountain as they speared the wolves and killed nearly all of them. However, some, with Courtaud in the lead, broke away and dashed for another safe haven, the doorway to the church. Here, under the stone arcade, they turned face, and Courtaud, along with 5 others, were faced with a ring of men. A mauling, grueling fight would commence. The men slashed at limbs and necks, and wolf after wolf would go down, only until one was left, the great grim king himself, Courtaud. The captain, a valiant man himself, and well known to love a fight, would cry out, "Hold back, since only he is left. We'll settle this in single fight." And then he would charge with his lance, meeting the Wolf King as a knight himself. Records show that the Wolf King reared and sprang to meet him. Unfortunately for the Wolf King, the lance would meet his chest, but having leaped forward with all his force, he slid his way up the lance, and the man went down. And as he was dying, Courtaud slashed and cut at the man, getting through his leather jerkin and ripping at the throat strap of his helm. Then he tore the man's throat out. It seemed the captain and the great wolf would lay in death together. As bells rang out from the cathedral, followed by the churches, it seemed 300 wolves laid dead in rows, and on a red and black draped platform, Courtaud would be displayed for all to witness. In the shadowed saga of Courtaud, the King of Wolves, a tumultuous tapestry unfolded. A tale woven in terror and unrelenting tension was wrought. The beast's feral domination cast a chilling pall over a modern city. as his despotic desolation sent shivers down the very monarchy itself as the last haunting echoes of a bygone era. Amidst this great narrative, the echoes of Courtaud's reign persist as a haunting chapter in history's curious oddities, and so the legacy of the wolf sovereign and the cryptic chronicle which raised such a beast remains an uncharted labyrinth. If you remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.